Welcome to another fireside chat episode as part of our series in precursor to the Global Strategy Nexus in Lagos. I'm Ishan Jasuja, as all of you know by now. I am today joined by a very special guest and a speaker at the Global Strategy Nexus, Mr. Mazi Sam Ohuabunwa. Sir, before we begin, could you please give us a brief introduction of yourself?
Thank you very much. My name is Mazi Dr. Sam Ohuabunwa. I trained as a pharmacist, but pursued a career in industry, rising to become the chairman and CEO of Pfizer in Nigeria and Pfizer in West Africa. And later on led the management buyout of Pfizer in shares, and then turned the company to Nimet International Pharmaceuticals. I've been past chairman of Manufacturers Association of Nigeria in Lagos, past president of Nigeria Employers Consultative Association, NECA, past chairman of Nigeria Economic Summit Group. I have been involved in advocacy. Currently, I've also been involved in professional activities. I'm the past president of the Pharmaceutical Society of Nigeria, and currently serving as the president of the Association of Corporate Governance Professionals of Nigeria. I have also played some role in politics. In 2023, I participated in the presidential primaries that led to the presidential elections on the platform of one of the political parties. I'm a businessman, I'm a professional, I'm a patriot. You can also add that I'm a politician of some sorts. But what defines me is economic advocacy, and also as a manager and leader in the Nigerian industrial landscape.
Very glad to have you. And personally, since my parents are doctors, I think you're one of the guests that I will relate the most to on this fireside chat series as of now. Before we begin talking about the governance landscape in Nigeria and Africa in general, I just wanted to get your take on how the private sector can help address the many public governance challenges that Africa faces. What's your take on that?
I believe that the story of Africa and Nigeria particularly is the story of underdevelopment that has lasted longer than it ought to be. It's a story of some poor political and economic governance that has stopped us short of achieving our potentials. Nigeria and most African countries have remained in the third world category, in the developing world category for too many years, whereas some of their peers in Asia and even in Middle East, many have moved away from just being a third world country to an emerging nation, or even some have become first world nation. And much of the problem is that the governance structures in Nigeria and in Africa have not sufficiently promoted private sector investment, because it is the private sector investment that drives in the economy. There's a minimum contribution that the public sector can do in generating gross development product. So the poor development of the private sector due to the method of governance of the public sector is the main reason the economy of most African countries, Nigeria inclusive, has been performing below its potential.
I see. So you mentioned Asia and other parts of the world, and I just wanted to take this opportunity to do a compare and contrast between how, let's say, countries in the Far East have helped develop their private sector, namely South Korea, Japan come to my mind with their national champion strategy, where they were very adamant on promoting some of their companies that became benchmarks in their industries. Do you think Africa can draw lessons from those? What are the differences and what are the similarities?
Yeah, I believe Africa can draw lessons. And those lessons are that for an economy to be promoting for private sector investment, then it must govern itself in some different ways. First and foremost is that the government must direct its policies to ensuring that they have an operating environment that is private sector led or private sector driven or private sector supported, in which case every effort is made to promote and attract investment. These Asian countries and Middle East and some other countries in Europe, in Eastern Europe, for example, what have they done? They have just made sure that they adopted investment-friendly policies. That is a lesson. We must focus on investment promotion because it is investments that create businesses, projects, and programs. Projects, businesses, and programs create jobs. Jobs create wealth, and wealth eliminates poverty, which is the end game of any governance structure or any governance plan, is to increase the well-being, the standard of living, the quality of life of its citizens. And so investment is critical. So if Japan, South Korea, and other countries have become centers, look at Dubai, of enterprise, it is because they make it possible for you to have first a predictable operating environment. There is some policy stability. There is an effort to maintain macroeconomic stability. There is enforcement of law and order. And corruption is minimized. Bureaucracy is limited. So these are some of the things I have from my work and my research that I have seen have been helpful in growing private sector participation in the economy of these countries that have led to the positive growth and their excellent performance, both in terms of GDP, per capita income, and even in the life expectancy of the people.
Yes, because I come from India and I see similarities between our demographics in India with a large youthful population with a lot of positive energy, excitement who wants to participate in the country's growth, and that of African economies, which have a similar young population that can help drive productivity forward. What I'm trying to ask is essentially, how do you think that the youth power and the demographic power of African economies can be leveraged to drive growth?
Absolutely. That is I would say it is the rate determining step for Africa's emergence and also the greatest potential that it needs to optimize to be able to break through the doldrums of poverty and social malaise. So the youth population is an advantage. It's a comparative advantage. It could even be a competitive advantage for Nigeria and African nations, just like India has done. They have invested in their manpower, produced educated, skilled manpower that are not only driving the industrial growth and provision of services in India, but they have also become exportable, in quotes, resources and assets that are driving external return to India in terms of foreign remittances, which have helped to grow the Indian economy. So what Nigeria and Africa needs to do is to be deliberate in investing in the surplus, in quote, youth population that it has, which are instruments that if they're well trained, educated, well skilled, well motivated, they will just be the elements that actually will cause the explosion and unleashing of the potentials of African nations. So that is where our investment in education, in skill upgrading is still below par. The African Union said every country must invest nothing less than 25% of its budget, or is it 15%? I can't remember. But most African countries are below. Some don't even do up to 10% of their national budget. So Africa needs to learn that We are looking for resources. But Japan doesn't have much of natural resources. They are using human resources, the brain power, and that's what driving the economy. Luckily for us, we have natural resources. We also can develop our brain power. So we should be ahead of Japan and Taiwan and such countries that are short in natural endowments, but are depending more on their human skills and human talent.
I agree. And you mentioned natural resources, which has been, I think, one of the key drivers of African growth until now throughout. And I recently wrote an article for the 16th Council as well, along with Dr. Brian Rubin. We were talking about how natural resources have been a double edged sword for Africa, turning out to be a paradox of plenty, oftentimes for the continent, where yes, they have driven growth, but the value addition has been very limited because these natural resources are exported to foreign countries in their raw form. And very little manufacturing is done in Africa, and even refining is done on the continent. So, how do you think that Africa can help climb itself throughout the value chain and become essentially not only a raw material exporting economy, but also a manufacturing one?
I think for me, and I'm speaking with local experience, is that our problem is largely with our political leadership. I'm sorry to say, is we have political leadership that most of the leadership is not fully abreast of the impact of value addition. They've grown up running an economy that is extractive, oil and gas, cocoa and kernel. Before oil and gas, they were extractive, oil, cocoa, cotton. And it's very easy way to get money, but they're not optimizing the chain, optimizing resources. And it therefore does not allow the economy to grow and get all the linkages and the benefits down the chain. Every of these products has a value chain. Oil and gas, is it agriculture? They have value chains. And countries that are doing well optimizing. Nigeria has the potential to not only produce natural resources, but also to add value. But our leaders have not paid sufficient attention value addition, because value addition will involve investment from private sector. And if that private sector investment comes into an environment that there is policy instability, there's too much bureaucracy, there's so much corruption, macroeconomic instability, policy instability. So when the private sector is not coming, they just keep doing the same thing they've done since colonial times, export commodities. So I think that what I'm asking for, in my view, is that we should try to find out we can enlighten visionary, capable leaders who understand the import of value addition, who understand that these natural resources are wasting. These natural resources, many are not renewable. One day they will run dry and will be left also high and dry. So they need to know, and that's what we're doing in advocacy. Is it through the Nigeria Economic Summit Group? Is it through the African Economic Summit? Is it through all the series of opportunities we're using, including something like the Global Strategy Nexus? They are all aimed at sending this home that nobody is going to wait for Africa. Everybody is moving on. And today we are going into the geopolitical environment where AIDS will soon dry up. In the Trump era, where nobody wants to feed anybody anymore. It's America first. It should be UK first. It should be Japan first. So how can we just be on its own? The earlier we started to optimize our opportunities, the earlier we decided to focus on what will give multiplier benefit to the greater people of the nations. The earlier we begin to benchmark other countries and their development paradigm, the better for us sustainability and the future of Africa. So the easiest, the fastest way to go through is industrialization, value addition. And that way, not only creating wealth, creating jobs, and you are giving so much opportunity to get every ounce of dollar you can get from a single natural resource.
I absolutely echo your concerns regarding how pressing the need for these changes is, because natural resources are only going to become more important, and the race to the bottom is only going to become more amplified as sustainability becomes a bigger agenda, green energy becomes a bigger agenda, because all of these critical raw metals are in Africa and there's going to be a race for them like nobody has ever seen. We are already seeing competition between the Chinese, between the United States to get to as many of these as possible. And Africa is very much the cradle of most of these critical raw materials and rare earths metals. I completely agree with that. And in that view, you move forward. What do you think would be the biggest opportunity, at the same time, the biggest challenge for the private sector in Africa? And how do you think that the global strategy nexus upcoming in Lagos can help address these challenges?
There are two areas. First is the public sector domain, where we need to keep showing models of successes, examples of successes in governance structures, governance models, in private-public partnership models, in focusing on investment, in how other countries have done. It's important that a program like the Global Strategy Nexus Africa will bring some experiential share of how Japan made it, how Singapore made it, of how Saudi Arabia, you can't believe it, Saudi Arabia is making it, how Dubai made it. So those are the kind of things I think our policymakers need to hear about. Secondly, on the track of the private sector in Nigeria is, permit me to say, most of Africa is still timid, tepid, of course, conditioned by the damages and the experiences they've had with our country. Because many of them start from a government policy, then down the line, the government reverses and they lose money and they lose time. So many are lethargic, reluctant to push the frontiers. And so they are looking for the line of least resistance. Again, we need some experience sharing from private sector operators from other parts of Africa and thought leaders to exemplify what advantages are available, because sometimes we can be blind to what is just next door, but somebody from outside sees it better. Secondly, we can also share experiences. Yes, Nigerian African markets can be tough, but we know that other markets can also be tough. As they said, the top is always greener next door. But we do know that there is no country where businessmen are not facing challenges, where they're not facing obstacles. How are they able to maneuver? How are they able to overcome? What kind of ideas? Is this in the area of pulling resources together? Is this in the area of de-risking our businesses? Is it in the area of exploring new financing opportunities from bilateral, multilateral development agencies and funding organizations? Is it in the area of understanding how insurances can help protect or de-risk some of the businesses within Africa? These are some of the things which I believe are important. Now, for me, the greatest challenge for business in Africa, I think, again, I'm not talking about textbook stuff. Our greatest challenge is leadership orientation. Somebody tells you it is power, it is energy. Somebody will say it is something. Yeah, I agree. If the leadership is not right, none of this will happen. We'll be talking about energy. We're talking about everything. Every Nigerian will tell you they've had so many stories about so many things. And yet, you cannot equate the success with investments or acclaimed investment. So I remain implacable that the critical factor that is holding Nigeria down is leadership. Because if we have an enlightened leadership, they will know that we need to do more investments in energy so as to reduce the cost of production. They will know that we need to have a different paradigm in policy formulation. That policy formulation should be deliberate and detailed, that there's allowance for debate, so that when these policies are made, they don't get changed the next day because they were hurriedly made, or they were made sometimes targeted at one individual or one group without thinking about what happens tomorrow. The policy reversals we have seen come from short-term thinking and short-term view. So these are the things I believe that if we have a leadership, then they look at the issue of energy. It's a major issue in Nigeria. They look at the issue of macroeconomic stability, and they look at the issue of security, because security is emerging as a major obstacle for industrial growth, private sector growth in part of Africa, Nigeria inclusive. My thought, my belief is that the moment you have the right leadership that understands the elements of how to harmonize and motivate the resources that the country has, including human resources, how they can build unity of purpose, create a vision that every nationality, everybody will buy into and show exemplary leadership, our countries in Africa will be able to sufficiently compete along with some of the emerging nations today.
I agree, because I think this summit also serves, as you said, as a very right place to build on the synergies between businessmen, politicians, public policy officials, and analysts. And we are very keen to have thought leaders like you speak at the summit, interact with the audience, and welcome as many audience members of ours as possible so that we can really make Africa the place to be. And it really has potential to be the primary engine of growth for the world economy going forward. But as you said, we need strength more than ever. We need fortitude more than ever. And we need to work together more than ever in order to make it the dream come true. So, with that thought, I think we are ready to wrap up. And thank you very much for taking the time today to speak to us, and look forward to meeting you at the conference in Lagos.
Thank you very much. It's a pleasure speaking with you. And I look forward to sharing a cup of coffee or tea or local wine. Some drink copper wine in Nigeria. You love it.
Look forward to it, sir. Thank you.
Yes. God bless you.